So basically, they just sent notice today saying that minimize all sort of travel in and out of Beijing, and if you need to travel for business, whatever, whoever who approves the travel from the government would be responsible if there's outbreak.
Really?
Oh wow,
Yeah,
hardcore,
Wow.
hardcore, man. No,
You-
That's hardcore.
I kind of don't you think that's kind of good, right? You're very accountable to what happens.
But then what are the penalties?
I don't know.
Oh, look at this guy.
Wow, Mr. Granada.
Look at him. Look at you.
What happened to your hair?
Yeah,
Where's all
what
your
happened to you?
hair?
I need to get him the light.
Oh, there you
There we
are.
go.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
There we go.
What happened to your
There we
facial
go.
hair?
You look very
You
Moorish.
look 10 years younger.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to look younger. Someone thought I was 50, so it hit me really hard.
Did anyone say Aladdin?
Is that why you did it?
No. To be honest, so I started Spanish lessons, and everyone around me is like 20 years younger than me. So I'm trying to fit in and not look like an old person.
Wait, everyone around you is 15 years old? What kind of Spanish classes are you taking?
Hey, yeah, that's true. What the hell? Baby Spanish. Taking baby
I
Spanish.
can't say too much, but let's just say it's aligned with the level of the books that I'm reading right now. So yeah.
Your internet feels very amazing today. Like it's so much better, even though we're in different countries.
I knew the answer was to move to Spain, but I just didn't want to, be so clear about it. But now it's clear.
Do you guys see Tesla today?
No, what happened?
What's happening to Tesla?
Yeah, tell us.
Orders for 100,000 vehicles as Hertz converts to electric rental cars.
Jesus Christ,
Ooh.
963. Are you fucking kidding me?
Should have got in
Yeah.
on that.
You-
No.
Man, I should have bought more.
I should have bought more too, huh?
You become $1 trillion company.
2020, I got in and out of Tesla 6 times.
Oh, I just held. I bought like at 40, but I bought a tiny amount, so this
Yeah,
wasn't better.
but now the last buy I think I did was at 620. So this is fucking awesome. And now I'm just gonna like
Hold
hodl
it.
for life.
Yeah, correct.
Hodl for life.
Hold on for life.
Hodl to the moon. Diamond hand.
Diamond hands. Super stocks. Hello, barbarians, and welcome to the 7th episode of the LLB podcast. Low-level barbarians from Asia with debate and discussion on trending topics with our usual host, man of the high ground, Dave Chang,
What up?
hailing from Wisconsin, with the gazebo in the background.
Yeah, got a gazebo back there.
Jangan, the information super connector from his lovely office, new office, I guess, different scene.
I'm working from home tonight.
And Andrew G, the master debater, hailing from Granada, Spain. How is Southern Spain treating you,
Woohoo!
sir?
Things been awesome, guys. Y'all need to come here. We need to just start this podcast from here in total.
Okay, so for the first topic, Shopee is going all out in Europe. Jangan recently held a summit where he probably discussed this on the panel, I think, and Shopee reached a $200 billion market cap, easily making it probably one of the top 20 largest tech companies in the world, somewhere up there. And I guess some of the reaction from your discussion, Jangan, was what, surprise, shock, or what was going on? What happened?
That was interesting. Beginning of this year, in January, we made a prediction that Shopee's stock would be hitting 200 billion by the end of this year. I think that was the 5th of January, and when Shopee stock just broke 100, I think it ended like 103. So of course, I mean, at that time when I was speaking with people, even people inside Shopee, they were saying that, okay, this is probably overvalued. It's very high, and the company is losing money. And if you work internally, unless you are close to the founders, you see chaos. So many people were saying that, okay, it still double. I actually even rise from that point. And of course, I mean, now we are 10 months later, and you see Shopee is a very different Shopee. So back then, people were talking about it doing financial services. It starts doing lending in Indonesia, and the Shopee Pay was going offline. But yeah, food in general was actually not even in the radar. So we did a food report in January this year as well, where we said, okay, Shopee, or by its subsidiary now, was the largest player in Vietnam, and even people in Shopee were saying that really, we are doing food delivery, and lots of people didn't know that. But of course, 10 months later, things are very different. Now it has gone global, and last week I was at a conference in online conference held in Argentina where I was speaking, and there's so many questions about Shopee because people are wondering who the hell are these guys who suddenly came out of nowhere and now it's everywhere, and you see Jackie Chan, etc., etc. So Andrew, you are in Spain, and you are probably able to buy things from Shopee now.
Yeah, I mean, Shopee's live. When you open up their website, you see the €1 or 0.99 euro products on sale already. So they're using the exact same new user cards that they used in Southeast Asia when they launched new markets.
Mm.
I think like the idea is very clear, right? The cross border is where you have majority of cheap assortment. They're going to launch this in Asia. They're going to launch this in LATAM. They're going to launch this in Europe, and this is their route in. Um, I think, Jiang'an, we were discussing this on the phone as well, which is like Southeast Asia is a mobile dominant market, and so Shopee's big key in there was by moving on high repurchase rate categories like fashion, health, and beauty, by moving into low AOV items and not focusing on basket size, by trying to get as many sellers as possible to sell, and then moving on this very like mobile dominated, young people dominated way of doing e-commerce. There's like an easy in way. So I think a lot of people in Spain, where I'm at right now, probably don't even think about e-commerce that way, right? Because like, I mean, it's sunny outside, it's October, people walk outside to buy everything they need. But the story of e-commerce uh, globally, I used to believe this is an emerging markets thing, but it is a story of access, right? If you live in Granada, like I do right now, my camera just broke down. I need to buy a battery part. In Malaysia, I would get it within 48 hours thanks to Shopee or Lazada. I can't do that in Granada. There's no site that I can find that actually has this battery part that can deliver it to me within 24, 40, not even 5 days. I literally have to go to Madrid or Barcelona to get it fixed. And it's crazy, right? We're in one of the most developed places in the world. And, I can't fix my own stuff, right? Whereas this isn't an issue in Asia. And it starts to get really funny when you think that we're from these emerging markets and I'm in a developed country. Like, what does that really mean if you can't buy things and just get your shit fixed, right? And so I think this is like, it's so easy to believe that we've hit some kind of peak and developed countries are at a certain level that other countries aren't. But I actually think the reverse is happening. Like, I've been on this tangent that Shopee is going to be $1 trillion company, and I still believe so. This is just the path towards that. They've realized here that by building the assortment that they have from China, bringing it here, starting with cross border, and then starting to do marketplaces. And it's a very global business, right? Once you get DOM products from France or Spain onto Shopee, you can start selling cheese in China and red wine in China, right? The amount of money to be made and stuff like that is incredible. But I just want to shout out a couple of things that we may not be seeing here, right? So stock price has gone up. Shopee's launching a bunch of markets, but there's two big things they did in these last few weeks that is absolutely impressive for me. Number one, Kavak, car sales company in Mexico. Shopee's one of the largest investors in their most recent round, right? So they had an 800 million round. They're now what I think $4 or $5 billion company, and Shopee's a big investor there. So Shopee's getting into secondhand car sales, and specifically the largest LATAM car sales company. Number two, last week's biggest round was a Series B financing for FTX. FTX is a crypto exchange, largest market maker, liquidity pool. C Capital is on there again, right? So they're taking that $1 billion fund they have, and they are broadening way beyond e-commerce. They're getting into crypto, they're getting into car sales, they're getting into all these other corollary things. And I believe they're not doing this the way Tencent is doing, which is just to be a silent partner. They're truly building a behemoth that is going to touch multiple different ecosystems at the same time, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, these guys are on a roll and they're doing a great job.
Interesting. Well, I think I looked at this a little bit differently than the rest of the guys. I looked at it from like a capital markets perspective, and so that's sort of like where I'm going to speak to this particular topic from. So it's super interesting, actually. Do you know how much the Nasdaq has performed? How Nasdaq has performed since March of 2020?
No.
Just talk.
It's probably one of the best years ever, no?
It's doubled, right? So I think,
Yeah.
and why I'm bringing
Yeah.
this up is in the context of any publicly traded equity, right? I don't think you can talk about it without talking about what's happening with the rest of the market. And essentially, if you think about it, the U.S. has to date pumped, I think, $6 trillion US dollars in financial stimulus from COVID and whatever. And that's not including, all the other money that other countries have deployed into the capital markets, or just the ecosystem in general, right? And I remember this conversation super clearly. So I think March, right around March, like end of March 2020, was when the first round of stimulus was announced, and that was a $2.2 trillion round. And I was having conversations with other family offices, and basically every other family office was like, "Dude, we're getting rid of all our cash equivalents, and we're just going to dump it all into equities because cash will be worth nothing in the next just foreseeable future," right? And you see that inflationary effect, especially in tech stocks, but like in the general, the markets are up, but like tech stocks in general are way up. And if you look at Shopee's market cap and price, that there follows a similar correlation because of that. Now, I'm not saying that that's the only reason that this is happening, right? I think the other perspective is this. Like, I think we've all discussed this before. The market cap or the value of any company is always a function of the narrative and the actual fundamentals of the business, right? So obviously, these guys have been crushing it, right? I think like each of their main business lines of like gaming, e-commerce, and payments is up like over 100% year over year. So they're doing really, really well. So that's a fundamental aspect of it, right? But then I think the other way to think about this is you have to think about it from the narrative perspective and understand like who's actually buying this thing, right? So if you look at their public float, about 70% of that is institutional money. So it's like your BlackRock, your Fidelities, your T. Rowe Price, your Goldmans, whatever. And you got to really understand, I think, the share price of the company or the market cap of the company. You have to get into the mindsets of the people that are buying it. So, obviously these guys are institutional capital. They're managing hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. So therefore, they're deploying hundreds of millions of dollars usually. So sort of both in terms of like by practicality and from a reputational perspective, you're only limited to like certain companies, which are usually blue chip companies, because you're not going to rip like a $5 million check into whatever, because it's just not worth your time. You're not going to get the returns from it. And also you just can't really do it to your investor base. They're going to ask you like, why did you spend like 3 days doing research on this company for a $5 million check? It's just not possible. Right. So if you take that, and that's one aspect of it. Now there's certain companies that they can only buy, only certain companies they can buy. The second aspect of it is, obviously they're huge diversified asset management companies. So they need to diversify their asset pool across multiple jurisdictions and multiple verticals. And I think this is the question where like Shopee comes in. So if you look at sort of their narrative, and I think it's a really good narrative, right? There are three major businesses again, which is the gaming, the e-commerce, and sort of digital payments. These three verticals are arguably the biggest beneficiaries of COVID, right? Because people can't go out, they play games, people can't go out to shop, the digital payments. They're in developing markets, which again, this is very much a growth story. Right. So if I'm one of these asset managers sitting in New York and I'm trying to deploy capital, and so I'm like, okay, so I can't put all my money into Amazon. I can't YOLO it that way. So I need to diversify a bit. So what are some other companies or stocks that I can look at that are sort of like gives me similar thesis match, right? And then to add on top of that, I think there's another really interesting point is the China question. So if you also look at Shopee's share price, there's some pretty big spikes that are pretty closely correlated to when China starts announcing their various sequences of regulation and antitrust and all that stuff. Right. So basically what I'm saying is if you think about it, like if you get in the mindset of one of these PMs or these asset managers, like here we have a company that's a market leader in growing sectors and growing geographies that have shown that they've been able to execute on a high level and execute consistently and well, right? So that's one aspect of it. Two, I don't really have a lot of other options, if I'm really being honest. Like I can't really invest in China because that's really risky at this point. I've probably capped out on my US allocations, and there's not that much to do, or there's not some comparables in other geographies. So like my worst case scenario is I put a bunch of money into this thing and just assume that they keep doing what they're doing now. I'll probably return at least the market beta, if not a little bit better. That's like
Yeah.
my down case, right? Whereas like my up case scenario is like they execute super well on all these things they're doing. Like they become the leaders in Brazil, in Europe, their digital payments business like really becomes something substantial, blah blah blah. In which case, yeah, then we're talking about theoretically, yeah, like a half a trillion to $1 trillion company down the line. So for me, this is if I'm sitting in the position of one of these people, it seems like a no-brainer almost. Like, yeah, of course I would invest in this stock. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of like my
So
perspective on it.
so you're saying essentially it's an emerging markets kind of growth play for these institutional kind of money to allocate. There's actually not much options, right? So you like what are you
Well,
investing if you're in US in something similar like Amazon, which honestly, like I think the points earlier that you guys said, like I'm like I talked to my friends who work in Amazon US, there's so much more room to grow. If you look at all the old department stores like Macy's, they're trying to do e-commerce, but compared to what Amazon's doing, it's like baby, like it's a joke. And maybe Jet is
yeah,
comparable, which is why Walmart bought them, right? But
No,
like,
the Shopify play, right? I mean, there's a
oh
story
yeah,
yeah,
of where the
Shopify.
D2C might lead out
true,
and
true,
somewhat slowly kill into
yeah,
Yeah,
marketplace
But
shares, which is also a global story that may happen.
yeah,
since we're talking about the investor's mindset, I mean, obviously we know that. I mean, many of the unicorns in Southeast Asia are rushing to get IPO'd. So Grab will probably go there first, and go to after they clear the Indonesian listing, which solves them their income. I mean, capital gain tax issue. They'll probably go to the US as well.
hmm
yeah.
Do you see these companies benefiting from this narrative or this sentiment or this I don't know mindset, this abundance of liquidity as well, or you see that I mean time might have changed. I mean, by the time they go public.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think we talked about this a little bit too. I think like a couple episodes ago, I think like one of the reasons Shopee did their big $6 billion round is because my personal belief is there is a window for them before all these other companies go IPO and become other options, right? I think my point at the time was if you believe in the Asia tech story and you're a public market investor, there's only like one company that you could really theoretically buy into, right? Which will no longer be the case in 2 or 3, I mean, whatever the timelines are, like sometime in the next 6 months, right? So I guess to answer your question, yes, I absolutely think there's still an appetite for the Asian tech story. Uh, I think the big question here is what is going to happen with inflation in the U.S., right? Because as we all know, when inflation goes up, it has a depressing effect on growth stocks just because investors can get better returns by actually holding cash or bond equivalents, right? So I think that's the big story. So or that's a big question. So unless we see some
Single
Do
digit
you
pretty
think?
percentage
significant,
inflation against a 2-digit percent growth, not comparable, man. Why do you think that people would hold cash and cash equivalents?
well, because right now it's like 0%, right? Like right now we like okay,
Yeah.
yeah, it's fine, it's a fair question. So I think like the U.S. Treasury yields are like they're basically flat. There's no Treasury yields, right? And then the U.S. because I'm here right now,
Yeah,
we're seeing like some pretty significant inflation in the last couple of months. Like I think the latest consumer price index is 5%, which we haven't seen in a long
yeah,
time, right? So then the question becomes, what does the
Yeah.
Federal Reserve do? So I mean, obviously, one of the easiest ways to combat
Mm,
inflation is you
mm.
raise interest rates. Um, and I think
Yeah.
anytime interest rates are raised, it's sort of the inverse of what happened, where before interest rates were zero, so much money was pumped into the system, there's no point holding cash or bonds, right? But now, once your
Mm.
interest rates go up and you start, whatever it's going to be, like 2, 3, I don't know what the actual percentage is going to be, obviously, but then all of a sudden you have like an alternative that you can actually consider as opposed to growth stocks, right? So I'm not saying
Mm.
that it's going to completely wipe out the liquidity, but it's definitely going
yeah.
to have an impact on it.
Well, it
Yeah.
also makes sense that all these guys are raising tons of like. It's gonna look really smart in hindsight if this is a bubble and inflation is like a permanent structural change and things collapse. It's because a lot of these guys are gonna be well capitalized to kind of weather the storm, So, but like I don't know. Do you guys think that's gonna be a problem in the near or medium future where there's real
I,
effects of this?
I have too much vested interest in the stock market to even consider what you're saying, Alex. Fuck
I'm
you.
ready to put my cash in when it
I
tanks. I don't know about you
I
guys.
mean,
If you're gonna be wiped out or not,
this
but
conversation is freaking me out. My heart rate is going up. I should be relaxed in this beautiful place, but now I'm wondering whether I should convert some of my stock holdings into cash. I don't think a crash is imminent. Look, I think the logic is. I don't want to get into like hippie land, but like if anybody reads like Ray Dalio's work, Like there's a lot of this thinking about what debt cycles are and how a lot of these movements do happen, right? But at the end of the day is, I think with the West, and I'm painting very broad strokes here, the direction that interest rates have been going, like yes, you may have these little pop-ups every now and then, but we're starting to enter 0% almost permanently, right? It's almost hard to find a reversal where we're even going to get to positive single digit percentage again in the next 10 to 15 years because of just the way quantitative easing works, the way most developed economies have just moved interest rate policies. So I think this relationship between inflation and interest rates will start to see things crumble in the next 5 to 10 years. Where that goes and how it looks like is really not clear to me. But for now, growth stocks will continue to grow. I don't think it's a real bubble. I think there's fundamentals behind all of this, which is accelerated tech in the last 2 years for something that was going to happen over 10 years.
Oh, it's one point. I don't think it's going to crash. It's specifically Shopee, right? But I do think the stock is grossly overvalued, if I'm being honest, right? I did like a quick EV to sales ratio, and it has a higher EV to
It's
sales
yeah,
ratio than Tesla. Like Tesla is like a 20, maybe not anymore because it spiked up a bit,
yeah,
obviously, right? So it's probably a little bit higher now,
yeah,
but like Shopee's like at 28, which is kind of ridiculous, if I'm being honest. I'm not saying it's not a good stock or it's not a good bet. I'm just saying it's expensive, right? And like I'm investing my
yeah,
own
for
money,
sure.
so I wouldn't buy it. But if I was institutional capital, then that's a different question, right?
I mean, since we touched upon macroeconomics, I'm not sure if you guys read the cover story of The Economist last year. Sorry, last week. So that was on, I think that the implications of instant data, which many of the government departments have been able to amass during the pandemic. I mean, people are forced to sort of make decisions based on instant data rather than surveys,
Hmm.
and of course, I mean, same as what Andrew said, right? I mean, lots of the development accelerated over the last 2 years, which would have taken like 5, 10 years. And same for the government, right? I mean, lots of data now is available at their hands, and for them to make macroeconomic decisions, for them to make monetary or whatever decisions. The question is that, I mean, would they be able to use this data in the right way? I mean, theoretically, they can smoothen over the cycles if they have all the real time data. But of course, there's always temptation for you to overreact based on indicators which depends on how you interpret it. So I think we're entering pretty interesting times. But as far as I think Shopee is concerned, I look at the business, it's pretty solid. I so I think what they have told their investors is that they don't have competition in Latam. I mean, I've done quite a bit of research about Latam. I believe in that narrative. When you go to Spain, I mean, who else is doing e-commerce in Spain? Amazon, Zalando,
I,
discount stores.
I don't know why you keep ignoring Amazon in all your analysis. Like this is $1 trillion company. It's
I'm,
arguably one of
I'm,
the
I'm,
most successful companies ever. And then Jagat, sorry, I need to call you out on this because every few weeks Jagat goes like Shopee's launch France, no competition. Like what? Like I feel like Bezos probably is rolling in his bed because of your comments, dude. Like they've built out. Look, LATAM, for example, I agree with you from the Southeast Asian Chinese perspective. There is no competition, but the truth is, Mercado Libre is pretty entrenched. You've got Rappi, a bunch of others, but I do agree with you. They're going to be caught with their pants down. They don't even know what's coming to them right now, right?
Yeah.
But in Spain, for example, people use Amazon a lot. Um, now, whether or not that's going to change and people move towards a mobile app, I actually think it's not as obvious as you think. I think it's going to take some time before people actually change their habits.
I was I, I was speaking with someone who is heading one of the countries for Amazon in one of the emerging markets,
Hmm.
and he was telling me that the biggest issue he faces is to get any initiatives done. So I
Mm.
remember him telling me that, okay, whatever you need to get done. I mean, for his country, he needs to coordinate with the regional headquarters. He needs to coordinate with I think Amsterdam. He needs to coordinate with Seattle, and this one another office whose name I
Yeah,
can't remember. So
yeah,
so in this like a close fight in a market which is not Amazon's core, I am actually
Yeah.
I'm,
correct.
I'm actually pretty doubtful whether they can put up meaningful fight. Oh, the question is
Yeah.
whether the same applies for Shopee if they grow big.
This I 100% agree with you. I mean, theoretically speaking, AliExpress has the same issue. They've been present in all these markets for what, 10 years now, and yet they've had no meaningful growth to speak
Well,
of because they still run this as like what do you call it? Like a transitionary office, like the team is sitting in Hong Kong and in Shenzhen, right? Whereas like I mean, anecdotally speaking, I've heard news that like Shopee's top brass, Forrest and Yegang themselves, with their newly
Well,
minted private jets, have been flying around, right? Forrest bought a
yeah,
TV station in Brazil. They're both,
yeah.
coming and spending some time in Europe, probably sometimes for personal reasons, but I think they have a vested interest to actually see the company grow. They're moving
I,
generals from within the company into these markets. Yeah.
I think that the
Yeah.
nature of that also is because of where they have been started out, and also the DNA of who they took in to build, right? And if you think about how Rocket Internet, it's like you have this like this mentality that you're not as big as China or America, right? So these big
Mhm.
countries think they know the right answer when they leave the countries. Like China going
I
to
think you're
Southeast
right.
Asia thought they could solve it. America thought they could solve all the parts, but so you have this big country mentality, but then you're too far away from it. But if you look at
Yeah.
the culture of where Shopee came out of, Rocket and then Forrest Lee and Garena, which I think is our next topic we're talking about, right? Is these guys have been forced naturally to from day one, they have to think, beyond their own market. Like if they just stay in Singapore, we never know who Shopee is, right? So honestly, like then you think about how they want to
Yeah.
expand, they take the same approach, but they have to go themselves.
It's
Yeah,
an
go ahead.
incredible angle. It's an incredible angle, and I think narratively speaking, you are right. Like I agree with you, but then I wonder why is it only Shopee? How come we've had, this narrative is awesome, right? You come from a small country, you have a chip on your shoulder, therefore you build a global company because you have to. It's a necessity story, not really a natural inclination. But then, like, how come there haven't been any others? Why is this hypothesis only true for Shopee and not
Andrew,
for
because it is because it's fucking hard. I mean, if you look at the
Yeah, it's
narrative for
hard.
Amazon, it makes sense. But who else has done it?
Yeah. I mean, you make it sound super easy, like, oh, I can snap my fingers and build a global
No, no,
company,
no, no, no,
Andrew.
no. So like, I mean, look, the story that you're saying is almost the same reason for why, I don't know, the Dutch and the Belgians were such great colonialists in the 1800s. I mean, when I say great, I mean that with inverted commas. But like, at the end of the day, it was these smaller countries that wanted to build some kind of colonial presence, and so they were conquering as much as possible, right? So it was a narrative of like, we need land, we need resources, let's go take as much as possible. We don't have what the Americans have, we don't have what the Chinese have, we need to build what we can, right? Now this is true to some extent, but then if this is true, how come more players have an I get that it's tough. I get that it's tough, but like
I think
I think this is just us trying to make a narrative that makes sense and connect the dots backwards. Like I do think Shopee has a bunch of special things. I don't think it's just because of them coming from a small country.
I think the narrative you mentioned about we don't have what I mean, sorry, they don't have what the Chinese have, what the Americans have, but the reality is that they have both, right? They have the experience and people from China,
Yeah.
and they have the capital from the US.
Yeah,
So
It's also
there are lots of things they can tap into.
that's that's
I mean, it's
incredible.
also it's also a second-hand
Yeah.
mover advantage. We're not talking about deep tech where you have to build, like Amazon had to build this out first, right? And it's more about how you mobilize better with while riding the current trends and sentiment and waves. So
Yeah.
it's just a
Yeah.
better way, like more recent way to mobilize and execute, and they're just executing better at the end of the day, right? So
True,
that's all it is.
true.
Alex,
But I just want to call out Janga. That's incredible analysis. Like to be honest, that is probably a story I agree with more. It's the
Yeah.
first time American capital has been coupled with Chinese, attitudes towards startups in this like beautiful coalition in Southeast Asia. Maybe that's the Southeast
Yeah,
Asian
could
story.
be.
Maybe
It's
that's a
about how
secret.
finding ways to get American capital to meet Chinese tech hard work style of working, and then like hit the world with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually a
That's a
pretty
good
good
point.
narrative. I mean, if you think
That's a
about
good narrative.
why we're not in America, or why Jianghan's not in
Yeah,
China, right?
yeah.
It's like
no,
it's a combination of everyone coming
I
together,
mean,
and
I wouldn't be any competitive in China. I mean, same for
Yeah,
same
I
for
think
America for me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
We
yeah,
don't
So
work hard enough.
yeah.
So
But
I would be cleaning toilets.
the fact that you have startups like Ula, who the guy has never lived in Southeast Asia, and then he was like, I can't do the startup in India, but it's a great idea. I'm just gonna move myself. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Ula. They're raising a 200 million round with Temasek and a bunch of others.
Yeah.
But the dude who's behind it never even lived in Southeast Asia, hasn't even set foot in
Dude,
Indonesia.
I
Yeah,
keep meeting more and more Indian founders that've been based in Southeast Asia for a long time, and they're incredible. Like
yeah,
some of the best talent that I've been talking to, and like, you don't hear about them, but they've been operating here for a while.
yeah.
And it's just amazing talent coming from India.
Yeah.
Correct,
Alex,
correct.
have you heard of
Yeah.
this? Have you heard of this narrative from the Singapore government about why there are so many good, I mean, Indian founders, Indian executives in Southeast Asia, and not as many Chinese?
No,
And that's the narrative from the Singapore government, where they were responding to
Well,
Yeah.
you know, they say that, but they are not friendly to granting PR citizenship to them. I've interviewed many Indian employees in Singapore, and they've been living here for like 11, 12, 13 years. They don't get PR, but you get take a Malaysian Chinese girl who's like, 20 years old, no experience. Oh, immediately you get PR. It's kind of crazy. There's a
Yeah.
disconnect there.
Interesting.
It's tough being brown, guys. There's not more I can say about that.
So,
but it's
Alex-
tough being brown.
Alex, the narrative, this might not be politically correct, from Singapore government when they're responding to people saying that
Yeah.
why they were giving so many EPs to people from India and why there were so many finance professionals for India working in Singapore. And the government response was, look, I mean, the reason why there are so many Indians and not so many Chinese is because there are much more opportunities in China versus the opportunities in India. So you have lots of talent in India, and the competition is fierce. Naturally, some people will spill over to places like Singapore. So that's what the Singapore government
Yeah.
says.
I don't want to get into the depths of this, but I have an understanding that Singapore tries to maintain some kind of quota between different.
Well, I mean,
groups.
there's a
really?
government narrative there, but also I would argue culturally, like being in Singapore and Malaysia, there's going to be easier transition for someone from India coming because they could speak English, right? If you're operating in this level of this bubble
Very,
of
very
tech elites, right? So I think it's an
Very
easier
true.
cultural translation, and I think a lot of the Indians I talked to, they said it felt not too far from home from them, not me. That's what they were telling me. So
Yeah.
Hey,
It depends on where in India they were from.
I mean, all over. I talked to many Indians. So
can I ask one last question for this topic?
Yeah.
So, question is to Andrew: have you seen Jack Ma?
Have I met him before? Yeah, absolutely.
Like last few days in Spain?
Oh, wait, is he in Spain?
I think so.
Yeah, go say hi, dude.
Holy shit, Jack! Jack, where are you, Jack?
Is that where China exiled him? Is that what this? It's like his version of Granada.
I mean,
or
honestly, if I was exiled, I would probably pick Spain as well. So, Jack, I get you, bro. I see why you're hiding out here. The tapas are really cheap and good. I get it. I get it, Jack.
It's his version of Elba, like wherever they sent him.
That's right.
But that's
right.
that's a huge vote of confidence for Alibaba stock over the last few days. I mean, if you look at it, it's risen like 30% over just 1 week.
Yeah.
Since that news came out.
Yeah.
What, the Jack Ma is in Spain? Or that Shopee?
Jack Ma is in Spain.
Yeah.
I actually did not know that. That's really cool. I'm gonna go find out. Do you know where he is?
Probably on New York.
As the information man, can you
Yeah.
get me his GPS coordinates? Because
Connect me to Jack Ma.
Do you have like Find My iPhone for Jack Ma?
Shall we move on?
wow,
Okay.
yeah, Jack is in Spain for a study tour. All right.
Let's focus, guys. Let's focus. So, do we
Right.
want to nitpick like why Garena was successful with gaming and the culture of gaming in Southeast Asia? And why you don't see this in LATAM? LATAM does have unicorns, but there's none of this profit gaming machine that we see.
Yeah, okay, it's fair enough. I mean, if we're just talking about gaming in general, and this is maybe something that I really should have done more research for LATAM gaming, but I think, what they did was really smart. They being Garena. So we've talked about this before, Alex, but is everyone familiar with the concept of the U curve or the smile curve in terms of value capture and supply chains?
Can explain to the audience.
I'll explain to the audience. Okay, so in tech, and just sort of like all business actually, this is a concept of like the smile curve. So if you think about sort of your like a traditional bar graph, right? On the x-axis, you have like where you are in the supply chain, and on the y-axis, you have where you are in terms of value capture, right? So obviously, in your bottom left, that's like very low value capture, and top right's high value capture, and then on the x-axis, if you're on the left, that means you're further up the supply chain, and on the right, you're downstream on the supply chain. So basically, this originally came from a Taiwanese I think chip manufacturer, and the basic fundamentals of the heuristic is that maximum value capture happens at the upper, like the beginning of the supply chain and the end of the supply chain. So how that translates into like silicon is basically like if you're a chip designer, you have high value capture, and if you're a chip marketer, you have high value capture. But the fabrication, that layer or that space in the middle, is very low value capture, right? If you apply it to like a media context, it's similar. Typically, people that own the IP for media, they generate a lot of value, and the people who are like sort of like the end control the distribution of the media, they also have a lot of value. And then the people in the middle are sort of like where there's not a lot of value, right? And so I think that's what Garena did that was ultimately very smart strategically is they basically took all the money they made publishing someone else's IP and use that to develop their own,
Yeah.
which is a much better business than
Distribution,
just
yeah.
marketing and distributing someone else's stuff, because you don't own any of that fundamentally. That's like a very fragile business, because you could theoretically lose that license at any point and you don't have any real control. You're just a middleman essentially. So that was my only point about Garena. I think that move strategically was very good.
But broadly speaking, it's also that there's a more of a gaming culture. And like, if you're talking about Southeast Asia and Garena, Vietnam was like the crown jewel for so long. It was like the biggest market where they made the most money for gaming.
Yeah.
And, you know, you look at China, Korea, Japan, very similar kind of things about gaming. And that was a very good regional moat and cash cow. It's like, you know, you build your cash cow first, then you expand in something that's more cash burning. Then you know that at least you won't die. Or like you know, as the trend follows, you raise money, then you can print much, you know, more cash. So I mean, it's very different than something like, I don't know, Jangan, you had a point maybe about Latin America and why this doesn't exist, or maybe Andrew will have some ideas about this.
I'm just gonna jump in, like, first step into gaming, and I don't know if we spoke about this before, but I remember some time ago I did this analysis on unicorns and broken by industry types, and I remember gaming stood out because of two reasons. Number one, gaming has the best by far return of like amount of funding raised versus valuation, right? So if you take funds as a percentage of valuation and you compare them across industry, gaming hits it out of the park. You just need very little funds to grow massive amounts of value, right?
Is that industry wide, or that's for the companies which reach the unicorn status?
So I downloaded basically 600 plus companies that became unicorn. So it's 1 billion and above. I broke them down into industries and then like analyzed them for different kinds of factors, right? And gaming just stands out for a few different factors. And when I say it stands out, I really mean like the rest of the chart is just like a single line, and like gaming just like stands out on this number. It stands out on years to become a unicorn. It stands out on average, right? And even if I remove like the crazy decagon, if I took out Roblox and Epic, um, and Valve, right? Like I took out the biggest one and I just kept like the unheard mini ones. It still stays, right? So it's quite an industry wide metric that is very interesting, right? Um, Now, why is it this way? And so this was like a very interesting avenue to try to understand what's this nature about gaming. There's a couple of things very interesting about gaming. First of all, you have two kinds of games, right? You've got very interesting AAA titles that just win, a lot of money. Like as a industry, gaming is worth more than music, movies, and TV shows combined, which is crazy, right? In terms of absolute value. Um, and that's because like per games, AAA titles are extremely expensive. People buy consoles, people buy other things. But even if you remove consoles, just the media itself for gaming is expensive, right? So
Yeah.
you've got this first block, which is like expensive titles as media. Then you've got the second new birth of things, which is like these marketplace platforms which sell basically nothing, right? Fortnite sells you dance moves, and people pay for that enough
Yes.
that it's become one of the largest games in the world. It's free to play, and then people are buying dance moves basically, and then they stand out about it. And then you've got these new like double-sided marketplaces like Roblox, where you have developers that build mini games inside a game, and then you've got the game in the game that's happening as well, right? And so I think the thing with gaming is the all of these three plays require a ridiculous amount of luck. You can't churn it out like so AAA titles doesn't work even in anywhere close to the same pattern that movies do. Like a movie takes at most 6 months to a year to produce, right? A AAA title takes 5-6 years. So like the sales cycle to produce one of its AAA titles is super long, and you need a ton of resources behind it, right? So what then happens is you have this like massive indie marketplace model where most companies just become tens of millions of dollars, or at most hundreds of millions of dollars, and never break out and become big, right? So this is where I think, like, to answer your question, Alex, I'm taking a long way to get there. LATAM actually has a lot of players in this sub 100 million play, right? So if you look at like the Candy Crush equivalents, mobile gaming, India, LATAM, Eastern Europe has a ton of these players, right? We're talking small shops that produce at most 2 to 3 games that produce tens of millions of dollars, and they're happy to just keep it that way. These games will never become unicorns, they'll never become very big, but they're happy to like stay there. They might get acquired and put into some larger play by another big player, but
Yeah.
this like bottom of the pyramid is actually massive globally, right? And it exists everywhere. So when we say success, it depends on what you mean by success. If you could run
True.
3 mobile games that make you $10 million a year each, and you're making $30 million fresh cash, and you get to live in Brazil, some people would call that a good
Yeah.
life.
So, but that speaks to
Yeah.
like the broader topic we're getting to, which is the newer unicorns coming out of Vietnam, right? So if you look at Sky Mavis, which was Series B only, became a
No.
unicorn, right?
So Sky Mavis belongs in the other two pillars that I was talking about. So it's almost like AAA games, great media, right? It's a very steep cutoff pyramid. It's crazier
Yeah.
than movies, right? It's massive, but
Yeah.
but like what we were talking about, like Sky Mavis is a different place. Sky Mavis is the marketplace model, right? Which is creating a whole new industry that didn't exist before. It's what Fortnite is
Yeah.
doing. It's what Roblox is doing. Sky Mavis and Loot and all these new players are trying to create whole new business models that didn't exist before.
Correct.
This one is a luck thing, right? I think you've got to hit like three different things
Let's
simultaneously to make a business model that's unique and different. With Sky
let's let's
Mavis,
let's, let's break down what is Sky Mavis for people who don't know, right? So it's basically a crypto gaming company, right? Their main game is Axie Infinity, and it's like Pokemon, where you have to
Yeah.
have these Axies fight each other, and essentially each Axie is a NFT, a non-fungible token. And if you keep playing the game, you have ways to earn tokens from the game itself, right? And
Yeah.
it's recently Andreessen Horowitz invested $150 million, making it a $3 billion valuation. It's on track to generate $1 billion in revenue this year alone, which is pretty insane. So, and the model is interesting, like you said. There's a take rate of 17%. So,
Yeah.
but this seems to be the new breed. The other different one, which is like reached the valuation status that's closer to what you talked about for the smaller developers, is Amanotes, right? With over 2 billion downloads and 120 million monthly average users. Their biggest niche was like Magic Tile 3, which is like, if you think about music and gaming, it started off with like Dance Dance Revolution in arcades. The evolution was Guitar Hero with console plus music. But what they did was console, music plus mobile, which is now like on an iPad, we have this kind of music game that is very niche, but then it's scaled really, really big. And they're a gaming publisher, but they've been able to hit enough AAA titles, even though there's like a mobile developer to be a unicorn status, right? So why is Vietnam able to produce this kind of quality when we don't see this anywhere else?
Well, I think, to answer your specific question first, Alex, I actually looked into this, and I think college comes from like an education. Well, it's two sides of this, right? There's like a demand perspective, and I think the other side of that is a supply perspective. What I mean by that is, like, as you've previously alluded to, gaming is huge in Vietnam, right? You were saying they're like Garena's most profitable market. There's definitely a huge gaming culture there. So obviously, anything that's developed for the Vietnamese market has to be of a certain caliber. Otherwise, you just can't compete with all the other options offerings out there, right? And second off, actually, I found this really interesting statistic. I didn't know, but Vietnam produces 50,000 ICT graduates per year, which is the most in the region, right? I think Indonesia produces somewhere between 40 to 50,000. Like Thailand is like 20. Malaysia is very sad; it only has like 8,000, and it actually even produces more than Korea. Yeah, small country, but yeah, but like even South Korea. South Korea is like a tech powerhouse, right? They're known. This is like one of their core industries, and they only produce like I think 20 to 30,000 ICT graduates or software engineers per year.
Yeah.
So that's one side of it, and then also they're of a maybe it sounds bad to say, but they're like of a surprisingly high caliber. So do you guys know what like HackerRank is? Okay, I'll just explain it. So HackerRank is basically it's a Y Combinator company from 2012. Basically, they put out these global coding challenges, and then people, 100,000 developers submit, and then they're rated by the community based on their output. And then every year they put out like a ranking infographic of where the top developers come from, right? So sort of at the top of the list is like what you would expect. It's like your China, your Russia, your Czechoslovakia. Those are like your tier one, more or less, right? But then like Vietnam is pretty high on that list. Vietnam is actually, I think, number 23 or something, which is only one rank below South Korea, which is 22. So essentially what you're saying, what's happening is you have like this huge domestic demand, and then you have like a lot of high quality people coming out of the education
Supply.
system going into this industry. So anything they produce is going to be of like a global standard, or if it's successful, it's going to be of a global standard, because otherwise they would never have made it. So that's
Yeah.
my perspective on it.
It didn't happen overnight. Like back in when I was living and working in Vietnam, it was already well known to have some like good quality tech talent, and also it benefited from also a lot of American Vietnamese coming back home to build businesses in Vietnam too. So there's also this kind of import talent from Silicon Valley and this kind of engineer ethos mindset. And 10 years later, right, they're reaping the benefits of keeping on investing in this as a highly skilled workforce. And in the region, it's going to be very hard to displace that, I think, going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think like long term is going to be a really. I'm very bullish on Vietnam. Like just long term, I think they have a lot of things going for them right now.
Yeah.
Alex, do you think the fact that there has not been that much venture capital going to Vietnam, has that actually played a part as well? So if you look at Indonesia, I mean, so much money have
Yeah.
in terms of having this talent available to tinker with things, to play with their own things, to build things on their own. Because if
Yeah.
if you look at the case of Indonesia, it's just like everything was basically forced to accelerate the growth by venture capital. So it's very rare for you to have a case of somebody building a product that's for the global audience.
Yeah, I think Vietnam is finally starting to wake up, and like I've held this thesis for a long time. So like from when I was working there, is that it was just a matter of timing that people actually realized. I mean, Vietnam is deceptively smaller than people think. Yes, there's like 100 million people, but there's only 2 big major cities, and the TAMs that you would actually probably reach are not that big. It's probably equivalent to a more developed market. Where wealth is more equally distributed, right? But honestly, it was just a matter of time before the government got its act together, invested more in infrastructure. That you're going to see reaping the benefits of money coming in, where then homegrown unicorns shoot up themselves. And there's this regional moat because of it's its own language, its own government, its own ecosystem, and then it's a very different kind of way to grow. And it's just a matter of timing, I think. And now it seems to be a very good time where people are realizing this. And I think now the VC money starts to come in probably. Before that, even PE had been struggling for a long time. Very small deal sizes, very small exits compared to like Malaysia or Singapore, which is much more developed in terms of AUM and management and exits.
So I mean, my point is here is that because of the lack of venture capital over the last few years, I mean, compared to Indonesia, compared to Singapore, and because of the existence of high quality talent and abundance of high quality talent, that might create different dynamics, right? Because if you look at, I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say most, but many of the businesses being invested in Indonesia, they're essentially online to offline businesses trying to reform the existing sectors, and I think lots of talent there is very tied down to sort of trying to reform the offline businesses.
This was my other criticism, like people, or more like why people should have looked at Vietnam more, is that from an infrastructure perspective, I think Vietnam solved a lot of other things that much better than what Indonesia has. If you look at the largest companies in Indonesia, like old industry, it's all consumer businesses, right? Like it's I don't know what are some of the larger companies in Indonesia? Like it's car companies, right? It's something that's B2C. Vietnam has very big, well, like one very big Chao Bull, I guess you could say, right? Which is Vingroup, but they are primarily a developer first, but they build out infrastructure. They build all these other things. So it's like, in a different sense, it's a bit much more mature, but you don't see the returns as fast, right? So whereas Indonesia, it's a lot sexier and bigger but you have to be consumer facing if you want to go to Indonesia. But then comes with its own stickiness of other problems.
And if you look at the 2 earliest unicorns of this region, right? I mean, Garena, which now became C, and VNG, and these were the only 2 software companies which became unicorns. Do you have other pure software companies? Everything else is like e-commerce, online, offline, etc. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I mean, I think that is very unique that Vietnam was able to do that. So it's possible that a lot of unicorns just could be country specific. I don't know if you guys agree, like because there's always this narrative of 600 million people, but it seems like not to be the case for the case of Vietnam, and maybe other countries could do the same if they're comparable size. Philippines has 100 million people too, right? Indonesia, of course, obviously. I don't know.
So I think there's 2 parts here, right? One is you have these asset heavy sort of startups that happen almost everywhere globally. Like Uber has an equivalent in every market, and so you can almost assume that the Uber equivalent in the market becomes a unicorn as well, just from the sheer size of the demographic dividend, right? And also the same for e-commerce, the same for all these corollary companies that support these things. Software standalone, to be honest, we don't really have a massive B2B SaaS unicorn yet. You've
Yeah.
got Neom, you've got some of these new, fintech plays, Aspire, etc., that may be getting into this region. But I don't know if we should look. I'm caveat this by saying I'm a big fan of crypto. I'm a big fan of what you can do with crypto. But Axie Infinity is a standout for a couple of reasons, right? One is it was a sneaky unicorn. It didn't like. It's not like It's not like if you could do a demographic trend, you'd be able to figure out that this weird thing was going to pop up.
Well, it
And
wasn't financially engineered, right?
I mean, okay, I'm gonna be off the cuff and just say this: Axie Infinity is a modern day casino, right? At the end of
Okay.
the day, the way Axie Infinity works is it's a play to earn. You pay like the average user spends 400 USD on Axie Infinity because you need to buy your Axies first. So it's not just play to earn; it's pay to play to earn,
Yeah.
right? Where else do you pay to play to earn?
Yeah. Casino.
Right. Right. So the way it works is an average user spends 400 USD. They buy a bunch of Axies. They then go and battle and try to get more Axies. These Axies are limited and scarce. Sound like casino chips, maybe? Right. And then as you get them out, you cash them out and you try to make money with it. Right. As a result, it's grown. It's a modern day casino, just it looks and feels different.
You know,
And
if
and yeah, and the crazy thing is like it's
Hmm.
predominantly played by Filipinos. So this isn't like
Yeah.
some tool that's being played
yeah.
by
Well,
developed market people.
what's
Yeah.
also
So
interesting is that if that was the insight of them building it's a perfect product market fit insight because all these countries in Southeast Asia ban locals from actually gambling, right? So it's like a legalized way with gambling using decentralized technology to achieve this. So,
Question. Does anyone know how
No,
you
good.
can cash out with Axie?
yeah, you can,
you
dude.
need,
It's tradable on Binance.
Yeah.
yeah, so you need to go to a
Ah,
crypto
okay, okay,
exchange,
okay,
right?
okay.
And you have to buy the Axies with Ether. So I think just convert to
Yeah, you have
Ether
to
and
buy
then
Oh,
the
so it's
you
an F. Okay.
e-
yeah.
ether or the smooth love potion SLPs.
So that bypasses the cash out problems lots of the casino apps are facing, right? I mean, because technically in all these countries you
Yeah.
can't operate cash out yourself.
Well, yes and no. Actually, yeah, it's actually I do know a little bit about this particular topic because we did a deal for when I was at Gentian. We did do a social mobile casino game, and it's actually very. So I agree with Andrew. First of all, what they did is actually I'm not sure if it's deliberate or not, but what they did was actually very smart in terms of skirting local gambling laws. But how this question is
Mm.
usually resolved with social casino games is you can't take out your earnings in cash. What they give to you are like rewards instead. So whatever those rewards are, sometimes it's like you can
Oh.
trade in your chips for like a toaster, or you trade in your chips for like
Hmm.
an all expense paid trip to some other casino where you gamble more money. And so this is like I think like
Hmm.
as Andrew mentioned, this is like a sort of like a more advanced way of doing this. I think for me, what's super interesting about Axie Infinity is I was looking into this company and I didn't realize that. Uh, and I'm trying to also understand like why Andreessen is investing in the company is apparently half of the user base of Axie, their experience with Axie is their first time interacting with anything crypto or blockchain related, and actually 25% of the
Mm.
people who play Axie Infinity have never had a bank account before. So right, so if you think about this as sort of like either
Whoa.
an on ramp to crypto or blockchain products in general, or
Yeah.
an on ramp to fintech, I think this valuation starts making a lot more. To me, it makes a lot more sense in that perspective.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it ties very nicely to the NFT. Like the one of the problems with crypto, right, is tying it to real world value and gaming. Honestly, like from what I've seen by playing games and the amount of people who spend money on games, like even mobile games are where you don't earn anything. You have people spending easily $100,000 in a mobile game, right? Like
So
you don't really hear about this unless you play these games, and but it makes sense that
Or
people find
you're
real
or you're
value in
one of
this.
them
And
that you spent a bunch of money on the mobile game.
not that much. I spent a fair amount when yeah, it's pretty
hey,
wild how they get you, but it could rack up easily with microtransactions. It's pretty
hey,
insane.
Dave. A few friends of mine run sort of casual casino games. So essentially,
Mm,
how it works for at least the Chinese ones is that, and of course you can cash in, but you can't cash out.
yeah.
But separate to the game operations, you have a bunch of people called coin dealers. who would help you cash out. And these
Yeah.
guys, I mean, legally have no dealing with the game operator. But I mean, in practice, you know how it works. And actually, Axie Infinity makes me think, right? I mean, in early days, what did Garena do? I mean, Garena in early days was going to cyber cafes in Vietnam to install the games and sell the game points. And what did Tencent do in early days? I mean, it was basically have all these QQ coins and had the ecosystem of coin dealers, and so that people can cash out. So essentially, I think certain things just don't change. It just becomes more convenient.
Well, actually, that's actually really interesting. Well, actually, I'm going to contest you on that
Go ahead, Dave.
convenient part. Actually, it apparently takes like 8 separate steps to be able to play Axie Infinity. It's actually quite a complicated
Oh, wow.
sign-up process. Yeah, because first of all, like I think you have to go. First, you have to go, like find a way to get yourself some ether, right? Because I think you can only buy the Axies with ether, right? So you have to figure that part first, and you have to actually get the app, and you have to do the transaction. So it's actually quite a complicated process. I think one of the reasons that they're doing so well is, like as was previously mentioned, 40% of the user base is in the Philippines, and the Philippines have been locked down for the last, I don't know, whatever, 6-7 months. So you just basically have you have a huge population of people who have nothing better to do, and you can make some money playing this thing. So I think that's definitely helped to boost their acquisition.
So I think the reason why A16Z is getting in and why there's so much fanfare for this, again, slightly controversial view, the total market cap for crypto globally right now is somewhere north of 2.5 trillion USD, right? Somewhere between 2.5 and 3 trillion. Now that's combining everything, right? Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Ether, etc., etc., etc. This is 2.6 trillion that doesn't have real fiat use cases. You can't take this Bitcoin to a store and buy anything with it. So its actual tangible value is missing. Its intangible value is also missing. You can't buy an e-commerce yet. You can't pay on Shopify. You can't rent a movie with it. There's nothing you can do with it, right? And so um, there is an element of this which is actually market making, and there's an element of this which is market searching, right? So it's not traditional VC where you're looking for a problem, but actually what's happening right now is a lot of people. That's why NFTs are also hitting stupid numbers. That's why startups that raise with both tokens. Like I was speaking to a bunch of startups that are raising with both tokens and with traditional angel rounds, and it's so much easier to raise with tokens because a lot of people like just bought some crypto in 2019. Now they have a lot of crypto just lying there and they can't do much with it. Sure, you can do flash loans, DeFi, blah 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 blah, but at some point these become zeros that are just growing in your account, and you're like, well, what do I do with it, right? So it's a very funky bubble that exists right now, right? So I think what's happening is, and if you look at the way A16Z is raising their crypto around as well, it's also being raised, like part of it they're planning to raise with tokens, which is crazy, right? So what's happening is this crypto bubble that's forming, and then that's finding use cases to invest in, right? I think that's why some of these things are doing so well, because people are just hungry for use cases.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So does that mean you put your money in Quiddly?
Yeah, I did.
Did you guys invest?
Nice.
Did all of you, did all
I need to
guys-
sign the safe. Justin just pinged me for
Changan,
the
are you
safe.
gonna
I
invest?
need to have a read of the safe.
I'm just waiting for us to have a discussion. They reach consensus. They are go with the group.
I'm not. I can't.
Okay.
I'm cashed out. I had to put my money somewhere else to do something last minute. So I'm a little cash strapped at the moment. So don't.
What are
don't
you
give me-
investing? Well, share some yums, Dave. What's happening? What are you investing in the Huh?
I'll tell you.
What is this, Dave?
I'll tell you later. I'll tell you later. We can come to Vegas with us. I heard you're gonna be in the
Wait.
US. Come to Vegas. We'll talk about it.
Oh yeah. I actually think the timing works. So let's do Vegas. Let's do low-level barbarians episode Vegas. Jangan, see you
Jangan,
there.
come to Vegas.
Good idea. Why not?
Okay, one question for you guys then. Do you think Axie Infinity is going to be a one-hit wonder, or this is just enough to just keep building for forever?
I don't think it matters, right? I think we've already
Doesn't matter?
reached. Yeah, I mean, look. I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of companies you can arguably say are quote unquote one-hit wonders, right? It's called Krafton now, which was the developer of PUBG. They're a one-hit wonder, and
Yeah.
they're like a $20 billion company at this point. And same like
correct.
Epic.
Roblox is 36
Yeah,
billion.
yeah,
It's a one-hit wonder.
Yeah, Roblox. I mean, well,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
I think
they are one-hit
delineation
wonders.
is you have to have a game that's big enough to become a platform, or that's built in a way for it to become a
Correct,
platform. If you
correct,
think about all
yes.
the major
Yes.
companies or all the unicorns that sort of like popped out this way. They're all like sort of platform play, like Roblox. Fortnite's a bit different. They just use the Fortnite money to fund Epic Game Store, but essentially it's the same thing, right? So I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's just a question of what they do with all their winnings. But I think they've already reached a point where they're big enough where if that's where they want it to go, then they can definitely go there.
So we see them acquiring like 50 game studios in Vietnam.
Well, that's the thing, right? I think the model has shifted. That's the old world publisher model, right? These games had a limited cap. It's just they didn't have the right business model mechanics to allow like microtransactions, which allow it to become a much bigger scale and size and grow a global ecosystem instead. So I think that's where it's shifting, and that in turn becomes more of a platform play and turns into the blurring of the metaverse of it becoming part of your reality every day, right? So. It's like your gaming becomes like Mythic Quest, the Apple TV show, right? Something like ridiculous like that.
Well, I think it's two things. Like one is like part of it is also part of it is like how the game was built, and also another part of it is just timing, right? Like for a long time, gaming was this super niche hobby, right? There's this great graph that basically just shows like the growth of the gaming market over the last since 1980, and starts with arcades, which is like this tiny market, and then console gaming became a thing, and then you increase the market size, and then PC gaming became a thing, then increase market size again, and then like mobile at this point is like 60% of all gaming, and mobile really all of mobile did is it just brought non-gamers and turned them into gamers because you don't need to buy a specialized device to do it, and now it's so prolific. And so it's such a part of our culture that I think, part of it's platform, but then also part of it is just like, it's just we're at the right moment in time at this point.
Okay, so how do we think about, if you want to build a unicorn in Southeast Asia, how should we think about it? Can you just focus on one country and then grow as a unicorn? Do you need can you focus on 2 countries, or do you need the whole region? How do you guys think if you're going to go build a unicorn tomorrow, how would you go about doing this?
I mean, if I had the answer to that question, I'd be doing it right now.
Yeah, same.
But if I quickly just I think it really, you can't generalize. It really depends on what the answer is. Look, there are certain things. If you're going to copy a very asset-heavy model from developed markets and try to build it the way you're doing it with Grab or GoTo or whatever, right? Then you're playing if it's a B2C player, you're playing the demographic player. You've got to figure out where the demographics are and build it, right? If you're building a B2B software play, then you're going to be in Singapore or some other markets that you get to service, right? So I think it really depends on what you're building.
Would you focus it more as if you're starting a company, would you be more globally focused first then?
I mean, so if you're trying to build a unicorn, I think it's up to you. Like, you can build a unicorn out of Vietnam if you wanted to. VNG is a unicorn, right? GoTo is a unicorn. You can.
Well, how about Malaysia?
I mean, theoretically, Malaysia has its first unicorn now. Carson's a unicorn. No, Carson is a unicorn.
Yeah.
And if you look at I fundamentally believe there's a bunch of business models that don't even exist yet in Southeast Asia that exist in other markets, like B2B marketplaces, right? Or blockchain-based supply chain financing. These are all billion-dollar industries. Just from the sheer size of these industries, you're talking about trillion-dollar industries. If you have one player that takes even 1% of that market, you have a billion-dollar business, right? So it's entirely possible to build billion-dollar unicorns. And it's funny for us because, if you wear your tech cap on, then there's something sexy about unicorns. But the truth is, people have been building billion-dolar businesses for years. Mr. DIY is a Malaysian business that sells hardware shit from physical locations. It's worth $6 billion today just because they figured out there's arbitrage in hardware products, right? Yeah. So call a spade a spade. $1 billion business is $1 billion business. It doesn't need to have tech. It doesn't need to have some special elements. Anyone can build it in any market. Yeah. So you don't need to have like a global business. You don't need to be a software business. You don't need to be sexy and hire people from Harvard. You can be a construction or cement company and build $1 billion business.
Let me add something. Did you guys see what I did with the Dimitri Levy of Central Ventures? I mean, we identified the pathways to become unicorns in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I saw that. Very cool.
Yeah, this is where it's coming from.
Can you send that to me? I haven't seen it yet.
I think my network is playing up again. I can't hear you guys.
Or just maybe briefly discuss Jangan.
Yeah.
I hear some interesting sound. I don't know who that is.
Maybe you could explain the article, Jangan, for Dave.
I have a sign saying that
can you hear me now?
Is not stable.
Can you hear me now, Jangan? tell your cats to stop using your Wi-Fi.
Well, that was interesting, Jagan. Thank you very much for that little wrap up.
Okay, any closers, guys? Anything to add?
No, I think this was a pretty good discussion. I'm
Dave,
really
Dave, do
looking
you wanna
forward to
talk more?
seeing you in Vegas.
Yes, I can't wait.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Okay, all right, guys. Great episode. Bye-bye.
Okay.
All right.